Don't read further. When you uncover the truth, hatred will burn stronger than love. The night before the wedding, I accidentally came across Dexter Morgan's phone. He'd sent a video of me limping on crutches to a group chat. Every time I see myself like that, I just want to puke. If I'd known I'd spend my life with someone like him, I'd have rather been the one who lost a limb. I wish I could call off the wedding. But in the next instant, I was back in the car crash, just like Dexter Morgan had hoped. This time, I didn't save him. Instead, he ended up with a broken leg and lost his sight while I was showering. His phone buzzed nonstop the moment I picked it up. A message flashed on the screen. Just go out drinking, get totally smashed, and tomorrow's wedding won't even happen. Or just disappear for a month. Her parents won't blame you after all you've done for Elle Woods these past 3 years. You don't have to waste your life on her. Just give her family some money if needed, or fake amnesia. I stood there, frozen. My hands were trembling. I couldn't believe it. The man I'd loved for 10 years, the one I'd been anxiously waiting to marry, was planning his escape. Each message felt like a knife to my heart. Every time I see her hobbling like that, I feel like puking. If I'd known I'd be with someone I didn't love, I'd have rather been the one to lose a limb. If it weren't for her family's company being worth something, I would never have put up with this for so long. The messages kept coming, one worse than the last. He'd even shared the video of me on crutches with his friends, making a joke out of my pain. In the video, you could see my left leg amputated after the accident. When the crash happened, I didn't hesitate to shield Dexter Morgan, taking most of the impact. That's how I lost my leg. I was a dancer, and in a flash, I lost everything. But I remember Dexter Morgan's eyes filled with concern. Back then, he held me close, whispering promises in my ear. Don't give up. I'll always be here for you. If you can't walk again, I'll be your legs for life. And yet, those messages felt like a slap in the face. What he'd said in the past, the care he'd shown, all of it now felt fake. The sight of me trying to walk, struggling to hold back tears, was pure comedy to him. Dexter Morgan came in. Elle Woods, what's wrong? He saw my tear-streaked face, and his voice turned anxious. He kissed my forehead gently. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Pre-wedding jitters. I turned my head silently, biting my lip. When I pulled away, Dexter Morgan instinctively reached for me, but when he saw the phone screen, his face went pale. He snatched the phone from my hands, panic flooding his eyes. I forced myself to stay calm, even though I was shaking. I demanded answers, but he couldn't speak. Then, the mask finally slipped and he shouted at me, "You don't get it. Do you know what these 3 years have been like for me? Every time we go out, everyone's with their beautiful girlfriends, and I'm the one with no one. People talk behind my back because my girlfriend's a cripple. I want to live a normal life too." Each word from Dexter Morgan felt like a dagger to the heart. His eyes were full of pity and contempt. It was as if everything he'd done for me was charity. "If I could, I'd wish you hadn't saved me," he spat. My nails dug into my palms, trying to mask the pain. A burning numbness clouded my mind, my ears ringing, and everything faded into silence. Suddenly, everything changed. I wasn't in our apartment anymore. I was back in the car, the day we were returning to college for our graduation certificates. The loud crash echoed. A car turning left collided with a speeding tanker, and our car was rear-ended. But this time, as Dexter Morgan had wished, I didn't leap forward to protect him. Instead, I saw Dexter Morgan trapped in his seat. I had a long dream. In it, I had a prosthetic leg and was walking down the aisle in a white wedding dress, waiting for my prince. But then, the screen that should have shown my memories with Dexter Morgan started playing my darkest moments. Me crying, breaking down while people whispered, and my groom taking another woman's hand. Dexter Morgan looked at me with pity and said, "Elle Woods, I'm sorry, but I can't spend my life with someone I don't love. I can give you money, but I can't keep taking care of you. The only one I've ever loved is Rosalie." I was left alone at the altar, everyone staring at me with pity. I felt like a clown, abandoned by the world. The anger in me was unlike anything I'd ever known before, and I stumbled like a madwoman. The scene shifted again, and suddenly I was on the rooftop of the hotel, my white dress billowing in the wind like a butterfly's wings. The only sound I could hear was my mother's desperate scream. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Dexter Morgan was in the emergency room. For a moment, I was stunned, unsure if I'd really come back. I thought it was just a dream. But when I pinched the flesh on my left leg, the pain was real. I burst into tears, overwhelmed with joy. My mother hugged me, her warm tears soaking into my clothes. "Elle Woods, you nearly scared me to death," she said, her voice trembling with relief. It was as if I'd come back from the brink of tragedy. But there was a sadness in her eyes when she spoke about Dexter Morgan. I remembered how she'd held back tears at my wedding in the previous life, how she'd forced a smile amidst the chaos. Everything felt like a lifetime ago. How lucky I was to get a second chance. Ignoring the pain, I limped to the emergency room door, where I heard Dexter Morgan's family crying. "No, he can't lose his leg. Dexter Morgan's too proud. How will he handle this?" It was his mother's voice, sobbing uncontrollably, but the doctor shook his head.
"His leg is shattered. There's a blood clot in his brain."
"If we don't operate now, we might lose him." In the end, Dexter Morgan lost his leg, but it was worse than I'd imagined. His left leg was amputated from the hip, and the doctor warned that due to the blood clot, he might lose his sight too. For the next 2 days, I visited Dexter Morgan constantly. The man lying in the hospital bed looked nothing like the proud, arrogant person I once knew. He was pale, motionless, broken. I sat silently by his side, determined to be there when he woke up, ignoring my own pain. To everyone else, it must have seemed like I was deeply in love with him. Even his mother urged me to go home, to rest. "I'm fine," I said, squeezing out a few tears. "I want to be here when he wakes up." But honestly, I didn't just want to comfort him. I wanted to see him wake up, to see the look on his face when he realized the truth, that he, the golden boy of his family, the one who had always looked down on me, was now the one who had lost everything.
His leg, his sight, his perfect life.
Finally, on the 5th day, Dexter Morgan woke up. As I entered the room, I saw chaos on the floor. It was clearly his doing. A caregiver was cleaning up broken pieces, and Dexter Morgan's mother looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen, as if she'd been crying nonstop. Despite being weak from the accident, Dexter Morgan still had the strength to be angry. He hadn't completely broken down yet. I had underestimated him. Dexter Morgan lay there, dazed, his eyes hollow like a lifeless doll. The doctor had said he'd lost his sight due to the pressure from a blood clot in his brain. It was temporary, they assured me. Once his condition stabilized and the clot was removed, he'd be able to see again. Dexter Morgan's mother glanced at his leg, then shook her head at me. It clicked. Dexter Morgan didn't know that he'd lost his leg. But I wasn't about to give him that knowledge, not yet. I pretended not to notice, walking swiftly to his side, holding his hand tightly as tears streamed down my face. "Dexter Morgan, stay strong," I whispered. "We can still get a prosthetic leg. We can still do everything we love, like horse riding, racing, everything." I knew Dexter Morgan would break down at some point, but I didn't expect it to be so intense. He suddenly gripped my hand, his voice shaking. "What did you say? Say that again." I was taken aback, but couldn't pull my hand away. I held on, despite the pain shooting through my fingers. "Dexter Morgan," I whispered, "if you want to cry, just let it out. I'll be here. I'll stay with you through everything." Like a madman, Dexter Morgan yanked the needle out of his hand and reached for his leg. His hand met empty space. He froze for a moment, then his body began to shake.
He roared in anguish, pounding his fist against his right leg, veins bulging in his hand.
Dexter Morgan's mother rushed to stop him, but he pushed her away with a single furious swing. The room fell silent except for his cries of pain. "Get out! All of you, get out!" Dexter Morgan yelled. After what felt like an eternity, Dexter Morgan seemed to tire. His body slumped back onto the bed, his expression one of total despair. His voice was hoarse, choked, like an animal trapped in a cage. I stood there, silent, tears falling freely down my face. But I wasn't grieving for Dexter Morgan. I was seeing myself in the past. I could feel what he was feeling, the hopelessness, the utter despair. It was the same feeling I had when I first learned I'd lost my leg. I'd trained for 18 years in ballet, even my teacher saying I was born to be a star on stage. But then, in one moment, I lost everything. My dreams were shattered. I'll never forget those darkest days. I locked myself in my room, refusing to see anyone. I wanted to hide from everything, from everyone. But it was Dexter Morgan who broke down the door, carried me out of my own despair. He held me close, kissed my cheek softly, and said, "Elle Woods, I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. If you need to blame someone, blame me, but please don't hurt yourself." Dexter Morgan convinced my parents to let me stay at his apartment. He promised them he'd take care of me for life. But in the end, it was all just a scheme. After our engagement, Dexter Morgan used my family's company resources to expand his business empire, rapidly surpassing my family's company in just 3 years. He sabotaged us in every way, openly and covertly. I remember my mother hinting at it a few times, but back then, I was too blinded by my feelings for him to notice. I didn't see his true nature until I read those messages myself, saw how he'd planned to abandon me, to use me. Now, as I looked down at Dexter Morgan's broken, devastated face, something changed inside me. Since I'd been reborn, I'd make him feel every bit of suffering he'd caused me. If he didn't want me, I'd stay by his side anyway, make him rely on me, make him fall in love with me. And once he couldn't live without me, I'd drop him into hell. So, with a determined gaze, I leaned in and held the sobbing Dexter Morgan close, his mother watching in shock. I whispered every word carefully, intentionally. "Dexter Morgan, don't be afraid. I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. Even if you've lost a leg, I'll stay by your side." And from that moment on, I became his caretaker. Every day, I went to his apartment, taking care of him, helping him in every way I could. To the world, it seemed like my love for Dexter Morgan had reached its peak. He thought so too. After all, who would tie their future to someone with a disability? When my mom found out I'd volunteered to care for Dexter Morgan, she almost locked me away. She looked at me with confusion in her eyes. "I know you like him," she said, "but his accident has nothing to do with you. Why sacrifice your life for this?" I remembered Dexter Morgan's cold words to me once. "Elle Woods, go ask your parents. Ask them what they did to force me." I never found out what my parents did to make Dexter Morgan feel obligated, but I knew that no matter how much he resented me, he'd suppressed his disgust and taken care of me for 3 years. He had never loved me, but now I'd make him need me. After the amputation, Dexter Morgan became more irritable. He was sensitive, paranoid, and hard to deal with. He complained about everything, the footsteps of the caregivers, the food, everything. He went through several caregivers in a matter of weeks, smashing things on his bedside table in fits of rage. But no one could calm him down except me because I understood him. I knew his pride, knew his sensitivities. When he tossed and turned, I brought him a cup of hot water. When he didn't like the cook's food, I made him the soups I knew he loved. No one else knew his taste better than I did. Within a month, all the servants and caregivers were gone. From then on, I was the only one allowed in his room. Sometimes, Dexter Morgan would look at me with those empty, lost eyes and say, "Elle Woods, you're so good to me. But someone like me doesn't deserve you. You really don't have to." I knew Dexter Morgan had begun to depend on me, but that wasn't enough. "Not yet." I gently pressed my finger to his lips, my voice soft and soothing. "I understand, I just care about you," I said. "As long as you get better, nothing else matters to me." He said nothing in return, but I noticed a touch more tenderness in his gaze. The warmth was there, but it still wasn't love. With my constant care, Dexter Morgan's temper gradually improved. The frequency of his violent outbursts, his destruction of things, lessened. Dexter Morgan was obviously relying on me more and more, but deep down I knew he hadn't truly fallen for me. Not yet. He still clung to his ideal woman in his mind, even as his health began to improve. The blood clot in Dexter Morgan's brain was finally removed, and his family brought in the nation's top surgeons for the operation. It was a success. On the day his bandages were removed, I could see the excitement in Dexter Morgan's eyes. He was restless, constantly glancing toward the door. I knew exactly who he was waiting for. After several glances, a figure in white appeared. "Jenny," She was a renowned dancer at University A, my old roommate, and the one Dexter Morgan had once adored.
He used to call us the two flowers of the dance department.
We were both graceful, with exceptional skills. But what he really meant was that Jenny was the one he wanted. I could tell from the way he looked at her. From the moment he saw her, he was captivated. I had loved Dexter Morgan for 10 years, so I knew what it felt like to be hurt. But Dexter Morgan never turned me away. He never gave me a clear answer, and I lived in the hope that one day he might choose me. But I knew deep down I had lost. So I quietly withdrew. I even stopped envying Jenny. Until one day, just before my wedding, I found their chat history on Dexter Morgan's phone. The messages were heartbreaking, filled with regret. Dexter Morgan, I've missed you so much these past 3 years. Me too. I regret not accepting you when you liked me. Now I realize the only person I truly love is you. Dexter Morgan, if I come back and crash your wedding, will you leave with me? I felt a wave of nausea as I read those words. I wanted to see if Jenny still had the nerve to disrupt a wedding in this life. Would she still want Dexter Morgan now, after everything? Just then, as Jenny stood by Dexter Morgan's bed, looking at him with sympathy, I stepped in with a fresh set of medical supplies. Dexter Morgan, it's time to change your bandages, I said, my voice calm. The flirtatious air in the room abruptly froze. It was as if time had stopped. I hesitated for a moment, standing awkwardly by the door. Am I interrupting? The doctor did say his bandages need to be changed at this hour. No problem, Elle Woods, Jenny replied, eager to take the supplies from my hands. I'll take care of Dexter Morgan. Seeing Jenny step forward, I felt a strange thrill. I was hoping she'd see what I had already seen, the reality of the situation. As Jenny carefully began peeling back the gauze from Dexter Morgan's leg, she visibly flinched. Dexter Morgan's left leg had been amputated above the knee. The stump was still healing, raw and jagged, the skin swollen and scarred. Jenny gasped in horror. The bottle in her hands slipped and shattered on the floor. She stumbled backward, her face frozen in shock. The tension in the room spiked again. Dexter Morgan's eyes darkened with disappointment. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, Jenny stammered, her voice shaking. Dexter Morgan didn't say anything. I could see the disappointment and the hurt in his eyes, but I was beyond sympathy for him. I'll leave you two to talk, I said quietly, slipping out of the room. I wasn't interested in their drama. From outside, I could hear Dexter Morgan's hoarse voice questioning her. Are you really that afraid of me? Am I that terrifying to you? No, Dexter Morgan. I swear I didn't mean to, Jenny's voice trembled, almost on the edge of tears. Not long after, I heard the unmistakable sound of something being thrown, followed by the distinct crash of glass. I smirked to myself. Dexter Morgan's anger had flared up again. But aside from smashing things, he seemed incapable of much else. Then I heard a curious yell from Dexter Morgan. Get out. Get as far away as possible, and don't ever come back. I don't want to see you again. Jenny ran out of the room, sobbing, and shot me a hard glare as she passed. But she didn't spare me another glance. The flowers she had brought for Dexter Morgan flew out the door, just missing my face. I smiled to myself. So much for true love. It fell apart in the face of hardship. Jenny's reaction was all I needed to see. Her feelings for Dexter Morgan were fragile. Dexter Morgan's already fragile mood crumbled further. His fits of anger worsened, the destruction more frequent. One day, after throwing his phone in a fit of rage, I saw the faintest hint of impatience on his mother's face. Who could blame her? The Shin family didn't only have Dexter Morgan as a son. His father had only visited him once since the accident, clearly having written him off. His mother, too, was under constant stress, juggling business affairs, company matters, and Dexter Morgan's unpredictable outbursts. She had even stopped coming to see him every day, now only visiting every few days. Dexter Morgan must have noticed her absence because his fits grew worse whenever she wasn't around. During one of these fits, when Dexter Morgan screamed for water, I pretended not to hear. When his anger boiled over and he yelled at me, I slipped in quietly. Dexter Morgan, I'm sorry. I was cooking soup and didn't hear you call for me. I'll be faster next time. Please don't be angry. It's bad for your health. Dexter Morgan glared at me, his face contorted in rage. I turned away, pretending to wipe away a tear as if I'd been hurt. If you truly hate me that much, I can leave. A flash of panic crossed Dexter Morgan's face. He clutched my hand, his grip suddenly desperate. No, Ludes, don't go. You're all I have left. And just like that, time passed. And I knew it now. Dexter Morgan was completely reliant on me. As Dexter Morgan's health gradually improved, I achieved my long-awaited goal of being accepted into the City Ballet Company. After 3 years of hard work, I finally stood on the familiar stage once again. Overwhelmed with emotion, I let the music carry me away. My body moved instinctively, each step, each pirouette, bringing me closer to a dream I had longed for. My heart soared as I pointed my toes, extended my arms, and danced like a butterfly in flight, feeling as though I could touch the stars themselves. Every leap and spin filled me with boundless energy and joy. It was during this performance that the director nominated me for an upcoming ballet competition. This new opportunity demanded my full attention, so I found myself visiting Dexter Morgan less frequently. His housekeeper called me several times before I finally found the time to stop by. The moment I entered, I could see the relief on her face. Miss Woods, thank goodness you're here. He's been having another tantrum. We can't calm him down. The instant I entered, Dexter Morgan's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing with accusation. What have you been so busy with? Why haven't you come to see me? He demanded. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Dexter Morgan was still the same proud, yet utterly helpless. I flashed him a smile and happily replied, before graduation, I applied to the City Ballet Company. I got in, and the director even nominated me for the competition. Ignoring his deepening scowl, I continued with excitement. This is a huge opportunity for me. That's enough, he snapped, cutting me off, his voice sharp. I feigned surprise, covering my mouth with one hand. Oh, did I say too much? I looked down at his empty left leg, my voice turning apologetic. Dexter Morgan, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I hesitated for a moment before adding, I've been so focused on dance that I neglected you. After the competition, I promise things will go back to normal. Before I could finish my sentence, Dexter Morgan slammed his fist onto the table. You're just flapping your working legs to mock me, aren't you? His voice was laced with bitterness. Even you see me as a cripple. I staggered back, startled by the intensity of his words. A cold chill ran down my spine. The irony wasn't lost on me. I remembered the time when Dexter Morgan had ridiculed me, calling me a sad little clown, limping around. Now, here he was, the pitiful one in his own tragic play. From that day on, Dexter Morgan became increasingly clingy. He couldn't bear my absence and called me countless times each day. Busy with rehearsals, I often ignored his calls, and soon I was receiving a string of desperate messages. Woods, will you visit me today? Woods, I want your rib soup. The housekeeper's cooking just doesn't taste the same. I didn't respond and simply silenced my phone. One day, a friend from the dance troupe teased me. Got into a fight with your boyfriend? I laughed and shook my head. Not a boyfriend, just someone who's clingy and desperate for attention. That's when it hit me, playing hot and cold worked wonders on Dexter Morgan. Rejected by his childhood crush and abandoned by his parents, Dexter Morgan had become a castaway, desperately clinging to the one person who could offer him any form of emotional stability. I realized that I had become his anchor, his only source of comfort. And seeing his anxiety and reliance on me only made me more certain that my plan was working. All I had to do was mention leaving, and he would go crazy trying to keep me. It was almost too easy. Men, I realized, always want what they can't have. And honestly, it was satisfying to keep Dexter Morgan dangling, hurting him just enough to remind him of his dependency on me. Dexter Morgan's birthday was approaching, and since his accident, he'd been avoiding people his childhood friends included. A week before his big day, I reached out to his friends and helped arrange a surprise. On the morning of his birthday, his friends arrived early, bringing with them a massive bouquet of flowers. His closest buddy even showed up with a limited edition sports car, hoping to surprise Dexter Morgan with a gift. When they entered, Dexter Morgan was practicing walking with his cane. "Dexter Morgan, look what we brought you," they exclaimed. The newest model, a supercar. The moment our eyes met, I could see the shock in everyone's faces. It seemed that the news hadn't spread yet that Dexter Morgan, the company heir, was now disabled. The friends stammered in disbelief. Dexter Morgan, you dot. Dexter Morgan's face turned pale, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and discomfort. His fists clenched, the muscles in his hands bulging with anger. Who would have thought that the golden boy Dexter Morgan would end up like this because of the car accident? The last thing he wanted to hear about now was cars. And here were his old racing buddies, pouring salt into his wounds. Seeing the car keys in their hands, he practically roared. Who told you to come? Who told you to come? Get out! Just leave! What should have been a celebration was ruined in an instant. I escorted his friends out, apologizing profusely. Please don't take it personally, I said, offering them an apologetic smile. Dexter Morgan just can't accept things yet. They nodded, regret written all over their faces, and left. Back inside, I met Dexter Morgan's stormy gaze. His teeth were gritted, his face twisted in anger. Elle Woods, did you do this on purpose? Did you deliberately make them come here to laugh at me? His voice was filled with suspicion and hurt. I looked down at him, neither agreeing nor denying his accusation. His expression shifted to one of deep sorrow. Why would you do this to me? He asked, his voice almost pleading. I was ready to spend my life with you. I love you so much. At those words, I couldn't help but laugh. After all the moments I had endured in my past life when he had ridiculed me, when he had vented in his group chats about how disgusting he found me, how he couldn't stand touching me now, he was the one who claimed to love me? Such cheap love. I didn't need it now. I recited the words I had prepared, my voice cold and mocking. Guys, seriously, every time I see her limping around, I feel like puking. If I had known I would spend my life with someone I don't love, I would have rather been the one to lose a leg. I just want to run away from this marriage. Watching Dexter Morgan's confused expression, I took a step closer, leaning down to whisper in his ear with a smile. So, does it hurt to be trampled on? Because in our last life you did this to me. Dexter Morgan seemed to recall something, clutching his head in agony. The pain seemed to consume him, and he fell to the ground, rolling in misery. Cold sweat beaded across his forehead. I looked on, indifferent. A deep sense of satisfaction bloomed in my chest. No one knew how many nightmares I had endured since my rebirth. In those dreams, Dexter Morgan pretended to love me deeply, only to cruelly push me into darkness behind my back. Night after night, I woke up in terror, unable to shake the fear that my rebirth was just a dream, that I would wake up as the Elle Woods abandoned at the altar. I fixed my gaze on his crippled leg. Dexter Morgan, you look so pathetic with just one leg. Finally, Dexter Morgan, lying on the floor, broke down. His eyes bloodshot, his voice a low growl of desperation. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Elle Woods, don't go. I turned and walked out the door, leaving him behind. I could hear his desperate cries, but I didn't care. Our relationship was completely severed now. I no longer needed to visit him, and for the first time in years, I could focus entirely on my preparations for the ballet competition. A few days later, news spread throughout our circle that Dexter Morgan was now disabled. His mother called me multiple times, each time pleading for me to visit him. I refused, but she wouldn't give up. Elle Woods, please just visit Dexter Morgan. He won't listen to anyone else. You're the only one who can ease his mind. Think of all I've done for you over the years. Just take a moment to visit him in the hospital. After hanging up, I found it ironic. After everything I had done for Dexter Morgan, he still wanted me to visit him. Wasn't he afraid that I'd say something else to hurt him? No, I had no more pity left for him. All that mattered now was my ballet competition, and I was going to win. I decided to ignore the calls altogether. I trained tirelessly, day in and day out, pouring everything I had into my practice. Only I knew how much effort I'd invested on that stage. I had dreamed of this moment for 3 long years, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way now. Every move was executed with grace, every leap and spin perfectly timed. The audience was moved to tears, and the applause that followed was thunderous, reverberating in my ears with such intensity that I almost couldn't bear it. Standing there, I teared up, my eyes welling up with emotion. For that brief moment, I forgot all my resentment, my pain. I wasn't thinking about Dexter Morgan, or anyone else for that matter. I was simply the brightest swan on the stage. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my heart. After the competition ended, I got a call from Dexter Morgan. His voice, though soft, held a hint of a smile. "Congratulations," he said. "Thank you." I was momentarily caught off guard. In a daze, I heard him take a deep breath. "I remember everything now," he continued. "I know I wronged you. I toyed with your feelings, and it's only right that you hate me, but I never wanted you to die." I tilted my head, staring out at the flickering neon lights outside my window. I didn't respond immediately. "Beyond the hate," Dexter Morgan's voice crackled through the phone. "Do you have any—" I cut him off firmly. Some things were doomed to be irreparable from the start. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Finally, I heard him say softly, "I see." That was the last time I spoke to Dexter Morgan, or so I thought. A few days later, I found myself in a hospital hallway. I didn't expect to see him again, but there he was, sitting in a wheelchair, pale and exhausted. The vibrant young man who once commanded attention now looked like an old soul, his eyes tired, his posture defeated. The nurse tending to him mentioned that he had refused treatment. The injuries from the car accident had worsened, and now Dexter Morgan was disabled. His father's illegitimate son had been openly welcomed into the family and had taken over the company. Dexter Morgan's mother had been hospitalized from anger, and the family was in turmoil. Yet, Dexter Morgan seemed indifferent to it all. Day after day, he remained in his apartment, staring blankly at the begonias in his garden. When our eyes met, he froze. For a brief moment, I saw hope in his eyes, like a flicker of light in the darkness. "Elle Woods, are you here to see me?" His voice trembled slightly, as if testing the waters. But just as quickly, he laughed at himself. "Of course not, you hate me." He looked at me cautiously, almost pleading. "Elle Woods," he whispered, "if there were a next life, would you forgive me?" I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of affection. It was calm, detached. "Dexter Morgan," I said, "it's all in the past. I don't hate you anymore, but I also don't want to forgive you." As the words left my lips, the light in his eyes faded. It turned dull, lifeless. Even though I no longer hated him, I could never forget the anger I had felt when I learned the truth, the lies, the betrayal. I could let go of the hate, but forgiveness was another thing entirely. The last time I heard news of Dexter Morgan was when I received the call about his death. He had taken his own life in the early hours of the morning, alone in his private apartment at Begonia Bay. Beside him lay a bouquet of bright begonias. I knew that begonias were my favorite flowers in our past life, the ones Dexter Morgan had filled the garden with, just to make me happy. Maybe in those days he had genuinely cared for me. A gentle breeze drifted through my window, and for a fleeting moment I saw the boy I had once truly loved, the boy who, after I won an award, would bring me a bouquet and celebrate with me all night. The boy who, when I struggled with my grades, would pull me into the library and tutor me. The boy who would helplessly tap my forehead when he was so angry that he couldn't even speak, but still cared deeply for me. I saw the boy who would, foolishly, let me hug his backpack as I watched him play basketball. We would ride our bikes home together, the sky glowing in the last rays of the sunset. Back then, I thought we would be together forever. I had no idea how cruel reality could be, shattering everything in its wake. It wasn't until much later that I learned the true meaning of the crabapple flower, a bitter longing, a hopeless love, just like what I had with Dexter Morgan. When I loved him, he couldn't care less. By the time he finally turned around, I no longer wanted to look back.